Throw away for obvious reasons. I, 35M, have been married to my wife, 34F, for a little over 10 years. We met in college. She was magnetic, the kind of woman who walks into a room and immediately owns it. Confident, funny, sharp as a knife. I fell for her hard and fast, and for the most part, I thought we were solid. We had a life built together, mortgage, mutual friends, matching bathrobes, the whole grown-up starter pack. But for the past 6 months or so, things have been off. Subtle, at first. She started locking her phone, which wasn't something she ever bothered with before. More solo girls' nights out, late returns, and a sudden obsession with fitness, not for health, but performative. Like she was sculpting herself for someone else's gaze. And her temper? Razor thin. Every question I asked, "Where were you?" or "Can we talk about this weekend?" was met with attitude, like I was being controlling. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. At first, I chalked it up to stress. I've been working long hours, and she's had a tough time at her job. I tried to be understanding, supportive, even suggested we do a weekend getaway to reconnect. She said she was too busy. Then she booked a weekend with her friends at a cabin upstate. No invite extended. Cool. I started having this gnawing feeling in my gut. You know the one. The "something ain't right" alarm that starts quietly but doesn't shut up no matter how much you try to rationalize it away. I didn't want to be that guy. The jealous, insecure husband snooping through her stuff. But when the distance grows and the answers stop making sense, your brain starts spinning stories. And sometimes, they're not just stories. So here's where things start getting real. A couple of weeks after that cabin trip, I was home early from work, surprise half-day, figured I'd catch up on some laundry and maybe get dinner started. I walk in, and her laptop's open on the kitchen counter. She usually works from the office on Thursdays, so that was odd. What caught my eye wasn't the open screen, but the notification banner. iMessage. Her friend Jess, the one she went to the cabin with. The preview read: "LOL, your insane face with tears of joy. I still can't believe you actually let him finish in your mouth after all that wine." I swear, my blood turned to cement. I didn't mean to read it. I didn't go looking. But there it was, served up by the Apple gods, plain as day. I just stared at the screen like it was written in another language, hoping I misread it or maybe Jess was talking about a show or a meme. But no. A few more messages came in. I clicked. And man, it was all there. Apparently, while I was home folding laundry and buying groceries, my wife was on a little adventure. Not just a drunken mistake either, it sounded planned. Coordinated. The dude had a nickname. Vino Vince. They were joking about it. Comparing notes on how wild it got. One message even said, "Glad my Uber didn't come right away, gave us time for round 2. I didn't even know what to feel. Rage? Numbness? Betrayal? Mostly, I just sat there, rereading the messages like maybe, if I read them enough times, they'd change. They didn't. The craziest part. She walked in 20 minutes later like nothing happened. Kissed me on the cheek. Asked what I wanted to do for dinner. I said, "You want wine?" She laughed and said, "After last weekend? I'm detoxing." I smiled back. And right there, I knew, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't insecure. Something was broken. And I needed to decide how deep I wanted to dig. After that night, I didn't confront her right away. Maybe I should've, but honestly, I needed to get my head straight. I was walking around with this nuclear truth burning a hole in my chest, pretending everything was normal. It was like playing house with a ghost. I started paying more attention. Not snooping, just observing. When she was on her phone, I'd casually glance over. If she took a call and walked out of the room, I listened to her tone. And sure enough, I started catching the little lies in real time. I'm working late. But her GPS. Parked near some random condo complex. Just out with Jess. But the photos on social were old, recycled shots from months ago. At one point, I tested her. I told her I had a work dinner on a Friday night. I didn't. I parked my car 2 blocks away and just waited. Sure enough, right after sundown, she left the house in a low-cut top and those boots she used to save for date nights. Got into an Uber. I tailed her. Yeah, I know how that sounds. I didn't feel great about it. But I needed to see it with my own eyes, not just text bubbles on a screen. She ended up at some upscale bar. Not the kind of place she goes with her girlfriends. I stayed just long enough to see her meet a guy, tall, beard, wearing cologne you could probably smell from across the street. She laughed, touched his arm, and they ordered drinks like it was the most natural thing in the world. At that point, I didn't need to see more. I drove home, sat in the driveway, and just stared at the steering wheel. 10 years of marriage, and I was the last one to realize I was living in someone else's fiction. I knew I had to confront her. But I wasn't going to yell, or throw things, or make a scene. I was going to hit her with the truth, and let the silence do the rest. Alright. So, Saturday morning rolls around. She's in the kitchen, humming like she's in a rom-com, making coffee like we're just another happy couple. I'm sitting at the table, waiting. Calm. Controlled. Like a guy about to read her a bedtime story that ends with a house burning down. She hands me a mug, all smiles, and I say, "Hey, mind if we talk for a sec?" She pauses, senses it right away. That shift in tone. She sits down slowly and says, "What's up?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. I just said, "I know about Vince. The guy from the cabin. I saw your messages with Jess." Boom. Her eyes go wide. That split-second flicker of panic before the walls go up. She shakes her head and goes, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Classic. I just nod, sip my coffee, and say, "I also followed you last Friday. Watched you meet some guy at the Drake. You hugged him like he was your husband." Now she's sweating. I can see it. Still playing defense though. "You followed me? That's insane. That's controlling. You're spying on me." "Yeah," I say, and it turns out, I had good reason. She's fuming. Throws out every excuse in the book. "He's just a friend. We were talking about a project." Jess exaggerates everything. You name it. And finally, the crown jewel of deflections, this is emotional abuse, you know. Invading my privacy like that. I just sat back, looked her in the eye, and said, "Funny. I thought cheating on your husband was emotional abuse." That shut her up. Eventually, she admitted to Vince. Said it was, just once, and, a mistake. She didn't mention the guy at the bar. She probably figured if she gave me one confession, I'd stop digging. But here's the thing, when someone lies that easily, you can't trust their math. If she says, once, you multiply it. If she says, he meant nothing, you subtract your dignity. She slept on the couch that night. By choice. I didn't ask her to. I didn't say a word. And honestly, the silence between us said more than anything else ever could. The next morning, she was quiet. No humming, no coffee. Just this hollow version of her pacing around the kitchen, like she was trying to rehearse a script that didn't exist. She finally sat down across from me and said, "I didn't mean for it to happen." Like that sentence somehow made the betrayal more poetic. I asked her what it was exactly, Vince. The bar guy? Or were there more honorable mentions I hadn't met yet? She froze. I could see the gears grinding behind her eyes. She looked like a student who just realized she brought a cheat sheet to a math test but studied the wrong formulas. She said, "Just Vince. I swear." Right. I told her I didn't want the timeline, didn't care about the details. What I wanted to know was why. Why lie? Why cheat on someone who backed her, believed in her, carried her through every rough patch without ever asking for much in return? And she hits me with the classics. I felt lonely. You've been distant. I didn't feel attractive anymore. At one point she even said, "I didn't think you'd ever find out." That one stuck with me. Because it wasn't regret, it was logistics. The betrayal wasn't the issue. The problem was the leak. So I asked her, "If I hadn't caught you, would you have told me?" Long pause. Then, no. There it was. Honesty, finally. Too little, too late, but honest nonetheless. The rest of that day was quiet. I stayed in the house, but it felt like being trapped in a room with someone else's bad decisions. She tried a few times to talk, but I told her I needed time, not space, not a break, time. Because this wasn't something we were going to patch up with couples therapy and an apology letter. This was betrayal with receipts. And I hadn't even decided if I wanted to cash them in yet. By Monday, I started treating the marriage like a crime scene. I wasn't angry, I was clinical. Measured. I started mentally cataloging the lies, the little omissions, the gaslighting I'd missed or brushed off. Like that girl's night, a few months back where she came home tipsy and giddy, claiming she and Jess had karaoke'd until 2 a.m. I remembered her skirt was inside out and she smelled like cologne I didn't own. At the time, I convinced myself it was nothing. Just drunk antics. Then there was the time she asked me to drive her to a work retreat. I dropped her off at a hotel, not the venue listed on her itinerary. She said it was a mix-up. I bought it. I mean, why wouldn't I? Trust had been the foundation of our entire relationship. Turns out, I was trusting someone who was building a secret life in the crawlspace of our marriage. I started going back through our shared photos, text messages, even our credit card statements. Not in a crazy obsessive way, just trying to make sense of the timeline. How long had I been living with a version of her that didn't actually exist? I found receipts from bars and restaurants I'd never heard of. Uber rides at midnight from places she said she hadn't been to. She wasn't even good at hiding it, she just banked on the fact that I wasn't looking. And honestly, I wasn't. That's the part that hit hardest. I wasn't looking because I never thought I'd have to. She tried to act normal, like we could ride this out and move on. Made dinner, sat next to me on the couch, even reached for my hand at one point. I didn't pull away. I just stared at the TV like it was teaching me how to be someone else. Inside, I was already starting to emotionally detach. Not out of spite, just self-preservation. It's like when you hear the roof creak during a storm, and you start moving valuables to the basement. You can't stop the collapse, but you can try to save what's left. By the middle of that week, the cracks were showing. Not in me, in her. See, I was quiet. Calm. Not slamming doors or accusing her every 5 minutes. And that unnerved her more than if I'd lost my mind. She started probing, saying things like, "You're being distant," or "You're acting like you don't care." I told her, "You didn't care when you were with Vince. You cared about getting off and getting away with it." She tried to cry. I say, tried, because it felt forced, like someone crying at a funeral they were paid to attend. Her eyes were dry, her voice trembled just enough, but there was no weight to it. No remorse. Just performance. She said, "I made a mistake, but you're punishing me for it every day. How is that fair?" That one got me. Punishing her. I hadn't even raised my voice. I was just living in the fallout of her mistake. A mistake you own, apologize for, and accept consequences for. Not something you gaslight your way out of because the silence is making you uncomfortable. She started acting out after that. Staying out later with friends. Posting more selfies, stuff she hadn't done in years. Almost like she was trying to prove she still had options. I saw it for what it was, desperation wrapped in lipstick and filters. She was losing control of the narrative. She wasn't the wronged woman anymore. She was the one on the hot seat. And the silence, the emotional space I was creating, that was the part she couldn't handle. What she didn't know was, I wasn't punishing her. I was preparing to walk. So Saturday night rolls around, and she says she's going out with Jess again, second time that week. Hair done up, wearing that perfume she only wears when she's hunting for attention. I just nod and say, cool. Be safe. She gives me a strange look, like she was hoping for a fight, or maybe some last-minute guilt from me. I didn't give her that satisfaction. An hour later, I get a text from a buddy, Josh. He's not part of our inner circle, but he knows enough to keep me in the loop when needed. Apparently, he was out at a bar downtown and saw her with someone. Not Jess. Some dude in a black shirt with his hand on her lower back like he'd been invited there. He sent a photo. It wasn't grainy, wasn't up for debate. There she was, smiling like life was just fine, leaning in close, like they were in their own little world. That was it. The straw. The final proof I didn't need but got anyway. I didn't blow up. Didn't text her. Didn't drive there like some jilted teenager. Instead, I poured myself a whiskey, pulled out my laptop, and started separating our finances. Bank accounts. Passwords. Bills. I made a list of everything I'd need to move out or kick her out, wasn't sure which yet. By the time she came home, around 2 a.m., reeking of smoke and alcohol, I was already on the couch with a suitcase half-packed. She walked in, paused, then said, "What are you doing?" I looked at her and said, "You and your new friend look happy together. Hope it was worth it." She froze. Eyes wide. "You're spying on me now?" "No," I said. "The world's just small. And your loyalty is even smaller." She started yelling, throwing words like paranoid, overreacting, and my favorite, emotional abuse, back into the ring. But I didn't flinch. Just sat there and let her spin. Because at that point, I wasn't fighting to save the marriage anymore. I was planning my exit. The next morning was the quietest one yet. She came downstairs in sweats, eyes puffy, no makeup, finally dropped the act. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee and a legal pad. She sat down across from me and just stared. I didn't speak first. I wanted her to sit in it. After a minute, she said, "So, what now?" I told her plainly, "We're done. Whether it's divorce or separation, I'm not sure yet. But this marriage? This version of it? It's over." She started crying for real this time. Not performative. Ugly, honest crying. "Please," she said, "I made a mistake. I can change. We can go to therapy. I'll cut off contact with everyone. Anything you want." And for a moment, just a flash, I felt that old instinct to comfort her. To fix things. But it passed quickly. Because no amount of counseling or apologies could undo what had been done. Not just the sex. Not just the lies. But the erosion of trust, respect, and dignity. I told her, this isn't about punishment. It's about peace. And I haven't had any since the night I read that message. She asked if I still loved her. That hit harder than I expected. Because the answer wasn't simple. "Yes," I said. "But love without trust is just nostalgia. And I'm done living in the past." She didn't fight it after that. Maybe because she knew the mask had slipped too many times. Maybe because she finally understood that the version of me who tolerated all this was gone. I went for a walk afterward, no destination, just moving. The weight of the decision was heavy, but there was something liberating in it too. Like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. Once the emotional wave passed, what followed was surprisingly administrative. I moved into the guest room that night. Not dramatic, just practical. We weren't sharing a bed anymore, not after everything. She offered to sleep on the couch, but I wasn't interested in playing martyr games. I wanted space, real space. Not the passive-aggressive kind. That week, we split up the bills and autopays. I got a P.O. box. Changed the passwords to my personal accounts. It's wild how much of your life gets entangled when you've been married for a decade. Even the damn Netflix login felt like a custody battle. I called a lawyer, not to fire missiles, just to understand the landscape. He was calm, efficient, and didn't flinch when I said, "My wife's been cheating and lying, and I'm ready to nuke the paperwork." His advice? Stay calm, document everything, and don't move out unless I wanted to fight for furniture in court. She, on the other hand, started swinging between guilt and charm. One minute she was leaving long handwritten notes on my nightstand about how she lost herself and would do anything to fix us. The next, she was acting like we were roommates in a rom-com, asking if I wanted sushi or suggesting we just hang out like old times. I shut that down fast. I wasn't trying to play house with a woman who brought a wrecking ball to our foundation. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was focused. Clean cut. There's a kind of freedom in knowing the worst has already happened and you survived it. And honestly, I felt more like myself in those few days than I had in the past 6 months. By the next week, the gears were in motion. I found a short-term rental about 15 minutes away, nothing fancy, just quiet. Clean. A place where the furniture didn't remind me of old anniversaries and broken promises. I didn't tell her until I'd signed the lease. No drama, no notice. Just, "I'm moving out Friday." She didn't take it well. Said it felt sudden. That word hit me sideways. Sudden. Like I hadn't sat in silence for weeks while she snuck around and fed me half-truths in my own house. But I kept my cool. I told her, "You had your freedom. This is mine." Packing was harder than I expected. Not because of the stuff's just stuff, but because of the memories tangled in it. I'd pick up a book she gave me on our first anniversary, and for a second I'd remember the version of us that still made sense. But then I'd remember her laughing at some guy's jokes while I was at home checking the weather to see if she needed a ride. Every item became a filter, before and after. On moving day, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me load the car. I think part of her expected me to stop. Maybe break down. Ask for one last try. Instead, I handed her a copy of the keys to the safe and said, "If you find any more lies, leave them in there." She didn't say a word. I drove off with the windows down, not because it was warm, but because the air finally felt mine again. First night in the new place, I sat on the floor with a 6-pack and a pizza that cost way too much for how average it tasted. No couch, no TV, just me and the quiet. And man, it was beautiful. No passive-aggressive sighs. No, "Where are you going?" texts. No pretending to be okay for the sake of keeping the peace. It was just me, raw, untethered, and finally in control. The first week was weird. Waking up in a bed that didn't sag in the middle. Making coffee in a machine that didn't remind me of lazy Sunday mornings that turned into bitter Sunday nights. But with every passing day, I felt a little lighter. I got up earlier. Started running again. Picked up my guitar for the first time in years. Played badly, but who cares? She tried calling a few times. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, some tearful, some angry, all confused. Like she still couldn't grasp that she pushed this far, and I finally stopped pulling back. Jess texted me once too. Said, "I hope you guys can work it out." I left it on read. Because here's the thing, I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't looking to punish. I just wasn't looking at her anymore. I started looking forward. And for the first time in months, the horizon didn't look like a trap. It's funny how quickly things become clear once you step out of the fog. I started journaling, not something I ever did before, but it helped to see the chaos in ink. Flipping through those pages now, there's a noticeable shift. Early entries were raw, scattered, a man unraveling. But about 2 weeks in, I wrote something that stuck with me. She didn't ruin me. She revealed me. And that was the truth. The lies, the betrayal, the sneaking around, it didn't just hurt. It showed me exactly where I'd been asleep at the wheel. I let things slide. I ignored my gut. I traded confrontation for comfort, and in doing so, I let someone rewrite the terms of my self-worth. That ends now. I met with the divorce lawyer again. We laid out the plan, nothing messy, just clean cuts. We didn't have kids, thank God. That's the one blessing in this twisted mess. Splitting property, dividing accounts, it's cold math, but at least it doesn't cry itself to sleep at night. She tried to delay things. Said she wasn't ready to give up. Told me she was still in love. I told her, "You don't love me. You loved the version of me who didn't call you out." She didn't have a response for that. Just silence on the other end of the phone. That silence used to hurt. Now it felt earned. By the end of that month, I started feeling still. Not numb. Not broken. Just calm, like I'd walked out of a storm and realized the sky's always been blue underneath. Mornings got easier. I'd wake up without dread clinging to me. No more checking her phone location, wondering who she was really with. No more decoding lies wrapped in sweet tones and tight dresses. Just coffee, a quiet apartment, and a day that didn't revolve around someone else's moods. I reconnected with a few old friends, the ones she never liked much because they didn't fit her vibe. Turns out, they were my people all along. We grabbed beers, talked late into the night. They didn't judge. They didn't say, "I told you so." They just listened. That alone meant everything. I also started therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand how I'd let myself shrink to fit her world. It helped. A lot. Turns out, forgiving her wasn't the hard part. Forgiving myself for tolerating it. That took work. But I got there. I even caught myself laughing, really laughing, at a stupid meme one night, and I realized it had been months since I'd felt joy without conditions. That's when I knew I was healing. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer owned me. So here we are. It's been a few months now. The divorce is in motion. The papers are signed, the assets divided. What once felt like the end of everything now just feels like Tuesday. People ask if I still think about her. Of course I do. You don't spend 10 years building a life with someone and just erase them like a typo. But the version of her I loved, that person doesn't exist anymore. And maybe never did, not the way I thought. I don't hate her. I really don't. Hate takes energy, and I've got better things to spend that on, like rebuilding, relearning who I am when I'm not trying to carry someone else's ego on my back. What I've learned. Trust your gut. That little voice whispering, something's off. It's not insecure. It's protective. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. If you have to shrink to make someone comfortable, that's not love, it's survival. And lastly, peace is priceless. Don't stay in a war zone just because you've memorized the landmines. To anyone reading this who might be in the thick of it, who feels like their world is cracking under the weight of someone else's secrets, listen to me, you are not crazy. You are not weak. And you sure as hell are not alone. Pick yourself up. Dust off. Walk out the door if you have to. Because the person you'll meet on the other side of betrayal, he's stronger, sharper, and a hell of a lot harder to fool.